His Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Continuing with the third and final chapter of this section of Uddhava Gita, where the 24 gurus of the Avadhuta Brahmana are being described by him to King Yadu. and Krishna is narrating the same to Uddhava, and Shukadeva Goswami is narrating the same to Maharaj Parikshit, and we're repeating their message here this morning. So yesterday we began chapter 9. We heard of the Rara bird, or the certain type of eagle that realized attachment to things that are important to you. Undue attachment brings great misery, and letting go of that attachment for some higher purpose. In this case, the eagle was saving his life. That was happiness. So all of this is continuation on the same theme, knowledge and detachment for the sake of taking shelter of the personality of Godhead. So we're beginning with text 3, and we'll cover a good number of verses. They're short. This is learning from the little boy. In family life, the parents are always in anxiety about their home, children, and reputation. But I have nothing to do with these things, the Avadhuta Brahmana. I do not worry at all about any family, and I do not care about honor and dishonor. I enjoy only the life of the soul, and I find love on the spiritual platform. Thus I wander the earth like a child. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, a little different, similar. Those who are attached to family life are always anxious about their children, wealth, and reputation, but I have nothing to do with these things. I do not worry about a family, and I have no concern for praise or insult. I live the life of an eternal soul, and I experience affection on the spiritual platform. Thus I wander over the earth like a child. And Bhaktisiddhanta's purport, there's none for the BBT. When one has no interest in accumulating worldly praise or criticism, he can become fixed in the science of the self. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, I do not care for honor or dishonor. I do not worry about house or children. I sport and enjoy in the Atma and wander in this world like a child. He explained what he learned from a child. That was text 3. I think what I'm going to do is, because there's lots of images here that Shruti Mangara, who's now living in Houston, prepared. Yesterday there was one from text 2. This is about the Rara bird. Let's take a look at that one. There goes the Rara bird. One should give up the envious propensity to commit violence against others and should take to Krishna consciousness, whereby one sees every living entity as equal to oneself. On this platform of actual happiness, one does not envy anyone and thus sees no one as his enemy. Pandita Samadarshana explained.
You need to share your screen.
Okay. Shows over here.
That is from a different source.
Okay.
Is it the one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that was text 2. Pandita Samadarshana, Pandita Samadarshana. Seeing every living entity equal, having no envy towards others, others not having envy towards you, because you don't have envy towards them. Similar to this description of the 6 Goswamis, Dera Dera Jana Priyo, Priya Karo, Nir Matsaro Pujito. They weren't just dear to those who were sadhus, they were dear to the adhira persons, because the adhira persons saw there's no competition here. They don't want something from me, they're not envious of me. So they were very dear to even worldly people, although they were sadhus. Here's something from text number 3, which we just discussed, a nice image. In family life, the parents are always in anxiety about their home children and reputation. But I have nothing to do with these things. I do not worry at all about any family, and I do not care about honor and dishonor. I enjoy only the life of the soul, and I find love on the spiritual platform. Thus, I wander the earth like a child. And speaking of children, can something be done with what's on my screen over here, this block of images? Can you, these 4 images, can you just remove them? Can you take another setting to remove them? Oh, very good. Okay. Okay. So now we're going on to reading from text 4. Those of you that have the database or a book or something, you can follow along. Text 4. In this world, the two types of people are free from all anxiety and merged in great happiness, one who is a retarded and childish fool, and one who has approached the Supreme Lord, who is beyond the 3 modes of material nature. That's interesting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. The transcendentalist resembles a retarded person resembles a transcendentalist, but they're not quite the same. This is the BBT purport. Those who fervently seek material sense gratification are factually pushed down into a miserable condition of life, because as soon as one even slightly violates the law of nature, one must suffer sinful reactions. Thus, even materially alert and ambitious persons are constantly in anxiety, and from time to time they're plunged into great misery. Those who are nonsensical and retarded, however, live in a fool's paradise, and those who have surrendered to Lord Krishna are filled with transcendental bliss. Therefore, both the fool and the devotee may be said to be peaceful, in the sense that they are free from the ordinary anxiety of materially ambitious person. However, this does not mean that the devotee and the retarded fool are on the same platform. A fool's peace is like that of a dead stone, whereas the devotee's satisfaction is based on perfect knowledge. That was the BBT purport. Here's Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. The more one prays for sensual enjoyment in this material world, the more his desires for such enjoyment increase, so that he becomes more and more absorbed in matter. Those who are indifferent to material pleasures are freed from material miseries and are happy. Now, this is obviously not the happiness of sense gratification, it's the happiness of being released from sense gratification, which is qualitatively very different kind of happiness. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, in this verse, the lesson to be learned from the foolish boy is described. The Brahmana said, quote, I do not care for honor and dishonor. I am not worried about house, children, and so on. Just like a child, I happily wander about alone in this world. So that's obviously not the householder, but it's the Avadutta Brahmana, or the detached person. Now, is it possible to be detached when you're a householder? You know, that you go back and look at the other lessons learned by the Avadutta Brahmana, and certainly it is. Certainly it is. It's not that if it lets you take sannyas, you're a fool, or it's hopeless. So that's a nice image. Here's somebody trying to enjoy like a child. Okay, the prompt is not working. Escape. Won't let me escape either. What's going on? Won't move and won't let me escape. Oh. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, I'll just do it that way. So there's a fellow trying to be like a child. In this world, two types of people are free from all anxiety and merged in great happiness. One who is retarded, and a childish fool who has approached the Supreme Lord, who is beyond the three modes of material nature. I don't know how she came up with that image, but same text, number 4. Those who fervently seek material sense gratification are gradually pushed down into a miserable condition of life, because as soon as one even slightly violates the laws of nature, one must suffer sinful reactions. Notice there's a lot of red. Now, I don't think that the target logo was intended, but there it is. Check out this image. Notice the person's face in the middle of all that jumbled stuff in the window. Thus, even materially alert and ambitious persons are constantly in anxiety. And from time to time, they are plunged into great misery. Those who are nonsensical and retarded, however, live in a fool's paradise, and those who have surrendered to Lord Krishna are filled with transcendental bliss. Really good image, the one on the left. And here's one more from text 4. However, this does not mean that the devotee and the retarded fool are on the same platform. A fool's peace is like that of a dead stone, whereas a devotee's satisfaction is based on perfect knowledge. Nice image. Now we're moving on to text 5. And we're getting a new instructing element. So there was the eagle or hawk, whichever it was, then a child, and now it's a young girl. Once, a marriageable young girl was alone in her house because her parents and relatives had gone that day to another place. At that time, a few men arrived at the house, specifically desiring to marry her. She received them with all hospitality. And Bhaktisiddhanta expresses, the lesson to be learned from the unmarried girl is being described. Once, some men went to the house of an unmarried girl to ask for her hand in marriage. It so happened that the girl's relatives were away from home at that time. So the unmarried girl received the guests nicely, offering them asanas and kusha grass, and water. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. The story of what he learned from the young girl is now narrated. Coming out of the house with covered body, she welcomed them by offering seats of kusha grass and water while her father and mother were absent. And here's the graphic for this one. Very creative once again. Once, a marriageable young girl, there she is over on the left. She looks nicely dressed and sitting properly and everything. She was home alone in her house because her parents and relatives had gone that day to another place. At that time, a few men arrived at the house specifically desiring to marry her. She received them with all hospitality. Next, text 6. The girl went to a private place and began to make preparations so that the unexpected male guests could eat. As she was beating the rice, the conch shell bracelets on her arms were colliding and making a loud noise. Conch shell bracelets. Conch shell bracelets? I mean, it's just carved out of conch shell. Okay. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of the verse, O king, when the unmarried girl began to beat rice paddy to prepare food for the unexpected guests, the conch shell bangles on her arms began to collide with each other and create a loud noise. Wondering what, so this is commentary, that was a translation. Wondering when the people of the house would return and begin to cook, the girl began to prepare rice to serve the guests. However, her conch shell bangles began to make a loud noise. Text 6, there's a nice graphic. The girl went to a private place and began to make preparations so that the unexpected male guests could eat. As she was beating the rice, the conch shell bracelets on her arms were colliding, making a loud noise. Okay. Text number 7. The young girl feared that the men would consider her family to be poor because their daughter was busily engaged in the menial task of husking rice. Being very intelligent, the shy girl broke the shell bracelets from her arms, leaving just 2 on each wrist. Vishwanath's commentary. Because she was husking rice, they would think that her family was poor, thus she considered the noise disgusting. She was intelligent. Jiva Goswami, in his Kramasandarbha, writes, they saw she had many bangles on her hands, and if there were no noise from husking, it would mean that some other person was husking the rice. Text number 8. Thereafter, as the young girl continued to husk the rice, the two bracelets on each wrist continued to collide and make noise. Therefore, she took one bracelet off each arm, and with only one left on each wrist, there was no more noise. Why she broke the first one, she could have just taken them off. But anyway. Commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. The girl was embarrassed because husking rice is the job of a servant in the house of well-to-do people. The intelligent girl took off her bangles one by one, leaving only two on each arm. When these bangles again began to make noise, she took one more bangle from each arm, leaving only one. And that's what this one, it looks like she broke the bangles, but they're plastic ones too. The young girl feared that the man would consider her family to be poor because their daughter was busily engaged in the menial task of husking rice. Being very intelligent, the shy girl broke the shell bracelets from her arms, leaving just two on each wrist, with only one left on each wrist. There was no more noise. And text 9, last for this morning. Oh, subduer of the enemy. He's speaking to King Yadu. Avanti Brahmana speaking to King Yadu. I travel throughout the surface of the earth, learning constantly about the nature of this world, and thus I personally witnessed the lesson of the young girl. BBT purport. The Brahmana sage here explains to King Yadu that he is not presenting theoretical knowledge. Rather, by wandering throughout the world, the observant and thoughtful Brahmana had personally experienced the lessons learned from all the above-mentioned gurus. Thus, instead of posing himself to be omniscient like God, he humbly explains that he has faithfully learned these lessons in his travels. Paraphrasing Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, Bhaktisiddhanta writes, the Brahmana sage explained to King Yadu that what he was speaking was realized knowledge. By wandering over the world, he had experienced everything, and he had learned from the gurus under discussion. Instead of pretending to be an all-knowing mystic, he simply described what he had learned during his wanderings. And Vishwanath, here's the end, real short. I was at the house on that day. I saw all these gurus with my own eyes, not from being omniscient. So aside from expressing himself in a humble way, there are sources of knowledge, as we know. Shastra is the best, but to understand Shastra, it's helpful to see Shastra in real life. And so realization is one of those characteristic ways of learning things. Now, he's attributing the learning to the persons, but it's not like the young girl said to the Avadhuta Brahmana, oh, welcome to the house. I want to teach you a lesson. Here's the lesson. I'm taking off the bangles because da, da, da. but he just observed. So this circles back to the way this discussion begins in chapter 7. We're in chapter 9. It was very clear from the beginning in chapter 7 that the Avadutta Brahmana had not specifically heard from scripture or a guru teaching scripture. It was specific. And so how do you learn? And part of the resolution to that question is the Avadutta Brahmana turns out to be Dattatreya. Oh, Dattatreya. And in the Canto 2, Chapter 7, there's another place where there's a list of different avatars of Vishnu. Dattatreya is mentioned, and there it's mentioned that he traveled about and taught King Yadu Prahlad and others. And his teaching was largely this teaching of detachment. There's an interesting section in Canto 7 about the life of Prahlad. After Hiranyakashipu gets dismissed and there's discussion with Lord Nrsimhadev, there's another chapter where Prahlad is traveling about and he meets a person who's acting like a python, meaning just lying in the road, etc. Something similar to Rishabdev and what he did. It doesn't say that that was Dattatreya. It doesn't say that it wasn't. As I checked, because somebody recently asked that question. But in any case, he instructed many, Dattatreya, Haya, and the details of those are not expressed in the Bhagavatam. Whether they're expressed in other Puranic literature, I don't know. But he's the personality of Godhead. So personality of Godhead, even Krishna, Ram, etc., they accepted Guru. So perhaps, I don't know the details because not much is said about the life of Dattatreya. Did he have someone who functioned as his Guru? But in any case, he's the personality of Godhead. Knowledge comes from within him. He doesn't need some other source. So in any case, he is learning from these gurus and they're not giving scriptural teachings. They're just living their life, in so many ways. The hawk to the cranes, the bumblebees, the wind, the earth, the sky, and so forth and so on. Water. These are some of his gurus. He learns things from just observing. So it's one of the ways that you can learn things, by observing and seeing things within nature. Now, our standard is when we see things within the world that we get some realization about, we go to scripture to reconfirm. Guru Sadhu Shastra is our final. Otherwise, everything gets all over the place. Then you're just a poet who's imagining things. And that's not what we do. But he's referring to these different gurus as persons from whom he's learned by realization. Because it's within the Bhagavatam, we can take his realizations as authoritative. And it's consistent with our Siddhanta. It's a little sketchy. That is to say, it's Puranic history. It's being narrated by Krishna, so we can take it as truth. and being confirmed here. The Avadhuta Brahmana is saying, this isn't my omniscience. It's, I just have this channeling God capacity, and because God is omniscient, I'm omniscient, and here's some omniscience. It's realization, and it's a natural part of our relationship with Krishna. We get realizations. Fortunately for us, we have scripture, we have guru, so we can go to guru, we can go to scripture and cross-reference and see, should we accept this or not, as valid evidence. In this case, because Krishna is repeating it, and the person speaking it is Dattatreya, we don't need to cross-reference it. But that's one of the ways by which we know things, is by realization. Again, for the fourth time, to be confirmed by Guru Sadhu Shastra. In the matter of detachment, knowledge and detachment, because that's what this whole section is, all 24, including young girl, knowledge and detachment. We're getting lessons in knowledge and detachment. And our application point is specifically in order to not have interference in serving Krishna, because attachment causes interference. Undue attachment causes interference. Okay. Looking at the clock that reads the correct time. Wonderfully. So it's now 8:05. Let's see if there's some discussion, some questions or comments.
So one question I had was, so being Supreme Personality of Godhead, Dattatreya, why he had to go through a realization phase? It's already there, right? So observing nature, observing various events, is teaching us something specific?
He doesn't have to do anything. The premise of your question is correct. He doesn't have to do anything. So what are we to learn? We follow his example. He's teaching knowledge and detachment. He's teaching ways in which we can reinforce our understanding of knowledge and detachment. The practical application is learning from his example. Circling back, he doesn't have to do anything. He's not becoming a realized personality of Godhead. Okay?
Thank you.
Guru Maharaj showed these examples.
This is a fuzzy sound in the amplification system. Can you fix it? It's a fuzzy sound. Go keep speaking, he'll fix it.
These examples of gurus. Right? In the first class, I asked you this question. So, which category of guru they come under? Your answer was Varnamapadashika Guru. So, we can assume that if it is not active teaching, giving teachings to somebody, then that's a definition of Vardhama.
No, I mean, let's just say you're doing book distribution and you're meeting somebody. You can give them some direct instruction. But, how are they receiving that direct instruction? Largely, it's, take the book, here's what's in the book. So Krishna's that way. You're showing the path to Krishna. Because their heart is not in the position of receiving, transcendental instruction. Now, there may be some special cases where that's, it gets elevated, but generally it's like that. So one can be giving, it's a lot has to do with the receptive, what the receiver is channeled to or connected to, or what their heart is. Okay.
So in this case, the girl with a single bangle, so the lesson is don't be attached to material objects. To summarize, is it correct? Understand?
Yeah. That's one of them. Another is she's just, you use your intelligence. When you have some purpose. For the Brahmana, the previous is he's not attached to honor, dishonor. She's a little attached to honor, dishonor. They may think such, and so that's not good because I'm not a good husband. They may think we're poor, or not. We don't have servants to husk the rice, and so it's clear what her intention was. It was a material intention. So don't be attached, even when you have material intentions. Behind you?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. So you mentioned about the girl and honor and dishonor. It's like something like some like toxicity to having like a material honor or dishonor. Can that be more of an advantage?
Well, it's an advantage to enhance one's material position, but one who's hankering for a material position becomes more covered in understanding transcendence. Now, let's just go to Prabhupada, because he's like the gold standard. He would consider public response in some areas, and some areas he wouldn't. So it was, what he wanted was Krishna's pleasure and Krishna's attractiveness. Like, here's one example. In America, he began everything just by public chanting. When he took the World Harinam Party to India, while there was a good response, there was also a response from some that, oh, these people are beggars. So he changed the approach, and he trained the devotees to begin membership program, because that's, the approach is different, the respectability is there, and the purpose was to give them sets of books. To sell books on the street was now today in India, our ISKCON devotees sell books on the street. In all, in different public places, not just on the street. In train stations and here and there, they sell books. But at that particular time, ISKCON didn't have its credibility, so he just changed the approach. But it wasn't his honor. It was the effectively get the message across so that people could understand it and appreciate it at the heart level. So it's a standard item of charity. You help you give something to the temple, to a temple, and then the temple gives books. So instead of selling the books that way, it was selling, a whole set of books. So different standards were used according to the effectiveness of the mission, not according to a particular personal honor or dishonor. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
There is a question online.
Okay.
With reference to Srimad Bhagavatam 11.9.4, sometimes when we don't see any light and lose the transcendental touch in family life, we become vulnerable and seldom take shelter of childish happiness. How to take incremental steps to focus from childish happiness towards transcendental happiness. Stick to the path of unalloyed devotion.
One of the best ways is you see the examples of those that are not childish, that are somewhat matured on the path of bhakti, and you learn from them by their example and by their words. You model yourself after those persons that have progressed further along the path of bhakti. Keep their association. You know, it's going to be customized according to how you apply that same maturity, but find happiness in other ways besides the childish kind, in the transcendental kind.
Thank you very much. Next question. Guru Maharaj, how to cleanse and purify one's intention when one acknowledge and see one's own material attachment and motives being not pure and aligned?
When I hear that kind of a question, I think of navigation in the ocean, meaning navigating one's way through life. You have to know what the destination is, and even clarity of what the destination is may become refined over time. But you have to get your compass out and reevaluate what the destination is, because this is intention, sankalpa. If you really want to get into this topic, a very nice way to get into this topic is a book that Shivaram Maharaj recently published on sankalpa, or intention. Sankalpa Kaumudi, I think, is the title. It's exploring that topic of intention in different stages, right up to the most elevated stage of bhakti, or at least sadhana bhakti, moving into higher stages of sadhana bhakti. And so it's the refinement. Two refinements. What is, ask yourself, it may be uncomfortable to ask yourself, get used to being uncomfortable, and ask yourself, what's my intention? How to incrementally, as you just keep asking it. I'm ready to modify what I think is the real purpose of what I'm doing in this particular period of time, or the purpose of my life. You go back and reevaluate, and then you align, you get your compass out and align yourself. I sent out another way of answering this is something that I sent out because I read it and I found it was very nice. Sachinandan Swami, around the turn of the year, wrote something very, very simple and very straightforward about making New Year's resolutions. And he was using the language, your North Star, which is another way of saying sankalpa, or intention. Be very introspect and know, and be ready to re-introspect and again refresh the introspection on what's the North Star or true north or your goal. and align things according to that. And it's an ongoing process. Anybody that is effective does this at least in an informal way, if not in a formal way, on a regular basis. And that those things that you may call your intention need to be aligned with Krishna's intention, or scripture, what the real purpose and goal of life. So what we have are intermediate or shorter term intentions, and that should be aligned with the longer term intentions. It's a big topic. It's a good question. Those are some thoughts. So those are two reference, additional to what I just said, Shiva Maharaj's book and Satchidananda Swami's New Year's resolutions. And if you didn't get it, you can ask those that send it out. They'll send it to you again.
Next question, Guru Maharaj, from Sneha Valididi. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. In the summary of the chapter, it is mentioned that the lesson learned from the young girl is that there is quarrel when two or more people are present.
Yes.
In the same place.
Yes.
But in BBT translation of the verse said that she is hiding the status of her family. The message looks contradictory.
Yeah.
As you mentioned that she is attached to material honor and dishonor. Could you please comment more?
Sure. There can be multiple lessons from one thing. One doesn't cancel out the other. There can be multiple lessons. And I neglected to mention that, which, thank you for reminding me, you're a very careful reader. So I neglected to mention that particular message from the summary of the chapter. So thank you for bringing that up. It is an additional message, an important one. We're done?
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.